Shalom, family, and thank you so much for joining us for this week's weekly news update. It's always a pleasure and a privilege for me to join with you and sit with you as we go through some of these things that are going on. Last week, I was traveling. I got a chance to spend some time with my grandchildren and my children, and it was a beautiful time. So, thank you again for the 5x5. Appreciate that, my brother. And I do encourage all of you to make sure you keep your connections with your relatives. They may call you crazy today. They may call you frantic tomorrow, if you know what I mean. And so keep those things in mind and try to keep those relationships open to give you opportunity to influence them before it's too late. They may, again, have called you all kinds of names while things are unfolding, right? And I'm very proud of my son who behaved admirably, was practically surrounded, and he held his own and declared the word of Yahuwah, declared the name of Elohim, and shared openly. In fact, I got to order a bunch of new Racine Bibles for my grandchildren because now they all want one. They didn't like not knowing certain things, so that was a really great thing, and it goes to show you that if you train up your child in the way that they should go, when they are old, they will not depart from it. There was lots of times we didn't think he was paying attention. We didn't think he was really listening. But then, all of a sudden what comes flying out of him, we go, whoa, guess you were paying attention. Isn't that a beautiful thing? So again, thank you all for joining us. And if you're joining us for the first time, we do have a few people that are finding our channel, and we're so grateful for that, and grateful for those that are sharing the links on various social media sites. We really appreciate that. And I really am grateful for all of you who are awakening in this hour and are encouraging your brothers and sisters. Can I just tell you, way to go. Way to go. Keep encouraging each other. I know there's a little bit of an I told you so in each of us. We all want to kind of do that. But this really isn't the time. There's just so much going on that we want to kind of just encourage people. And they know that you were telling them a long time ago. And so they understand. And so then they'll thank you later. It'll come. So just be patient and don't be doing the I told you so. That's not going to work. But I want to encourage you all to share the links here and encourage one another. And as we do these reviews, we do them weekly so that we don't allow the effect that they're trying to have on everyone, which is to put you in a state of high anxiety. If you remember back on some of your dumbest decisions were made when you were either rushing or feeling a lot of fear. And so I really believe Elohim wants us to slow things down, get a chance to look at them from the 10,000-foot view, seated in Mashiach in heavenly places, as it says in Ephesians chapter 2. And we do have a website that we put up. It's called remnantwatch.com. And on the top of it, you'll always find a link to the latest broadcast. So if you're not sure where the latest one is, you can always just go to remnantwatch.com and hit that top link. And here you'll find all the stories that not only we're going to talk about this week, but even last week's, there were stories still posted, even though we didn't do a broadcast. And so it's still a good thing to update or keep bookmarked for your review. And we do that as a labor of love. You'll notice there's not a ton of advertising or anything on there. We do that to keep it as clear as possible and encourage each and every one of you so you can do your research without much in your way. All right. Well, thank you again. And on that note, let's get into the news. And today's top story is a doozy, something that we've been watching, and all of you who have been very sharp students, paying attention to the things going on, paying attention to what the scripture has, of course, foretold, knew that some of these things were coming. So none of this should be a surprise, but it is interesting to watch it unfold, isn't it? It is very interesting to be alive during this time. Very interesting. And so the Federal Reserve dollars days as a universal reserve currency, well, it appears that is coming to an end. And this is something, again, that we talked about for the last year. We talked about the fact that the BRICS currency and the BRICS nations were really eyeballing the dollar, really not holding back in their attack against the dollar. And current debates around the international monetary system focus on de-dollarization. So this is openly discussed now. You see this? First line, very first line they say, Despite model shifts to other currencies ago, the US dollar remains dominant due to its incumbency, large share of trade and reserves, and liquid capital markets, which are quickly being replaced. So while there's certain amounts of inertia that are there, what we saw coming and is now beginning to affect the average person, and we're going to see why here in a moment, this was something that we saw coming a long ways off. And so again, it is only a certain amount of time that usually a currency is in the reserve status. And it looks to me like the Federal Reserve dollar, is running its course. I don't want to call that. Many times people call it the US dollar, and it's kind of a nickname for it, but it really isn't the US dollar. It's a Federal Reserve dollar. And the United States is not printing its own dollar. It is farmed that out to a third party. So that means their dollar is falling apart because people began to figure out the machinations that were going on. So entire countries are disconnecting from the dollar. The dollar used to be required in order to purchase oil for the last 50 years. That deal expired this year. So will that affect the average person? I think you're already beginning to see that. Just over the weekend, we saw in Japan, the Nikkei sees its biggest rout since 1987 in what is called a Black Monday. Now, why does this matter? Well, the scripture foretells a time when economic situation will get so bad that it will require a man's full day's wages just to eat. Okay? And so this is what this indicates as we're moving in that direction. Japanese stocks collapsed on Monday in their biggest single-day rout. So now we not only have epic weather situations that have never happened before, but now we have financial situations that have never happened before. In their biggest single-day rout since 1987, Black Monday sell-off driven by last week's plunge in global stock markets, economic concerns, and worries investments funded by a cheap yen were being unwound. And I do believe that it is also because, and this is sort of the elephant in the room, if their primary reserves were in dollars and dollars are on their way out, what does that say to the markets, right? So there's a reason why Berkshire Hathaway was selling billions of dollars worth of their stock over the last week or so, or I think it was the last 2 weeks, if I remember the report correctly. Don't quote me on that, but you can go look it up, and I'm sure it was relatively soon. And so they were indicating, if you follow the leader, if you follow these guys, they were letting you know that it was time to exit. It was time to get out of certain things. And the reason why is they know what they're not telling the average guy on the street. It's kind of like that movie Deep Impact. Remember that movie Deep Impact, where they knew there was a meteor or whatever, a comet or whatever they call that, on its way in? Did they tell the people? No. They left them there. They were digging out their tunnels, and they were making their plans, and they left the people completely blind. They had no idea. Same thing. It's a different kind of meteor. It's an economic meteor. It's an economic earthquake. And you're just now seeing what people have been shouting for actually several years now, that this was impending, that there was no way around it, because mathematically they're beginning to run out of time. And so they can only kick this can down the road so far. And this is why I believe they needed war, or at least the appearance of war, so that they could justify spending. I mean, after all of their major economy driving industries require the harm of people. So these industries are not in our best interest. And so this is just another part of the world that has to come to an end, so we can kind of walk into this new age that I believe Elohim is bringing us into. Of course, Mashiach told us he would be with us to the end of the age, or the end of the eon. And so we're coming out of this eon into his new kingdom. And we're seeing the effects. They don't want to give you your Jubilee. Well, he's going to take it. Dow tumbles 1,000 points. S&P 500, worst day since 2022. In global market sell-off, with live updates. Of course, they're all watching this very closely. How many know that those that worship Mammon are really having a bad day? Stocks fell sharply on Monday with the Dow Jones Industrial Average posting its worst day in nearly 2 years as worries over the health of the U.S. economy spark a global market sell-off. And there should be, this is common sense, because at some point they knew it was going to come home, right? So they knew at some point logic was going to kick in. Like, people were going to stop buying the euphoria. They would stop buying the, the hype and the nonsense and the manipulation of the numbers. And what would they do? They would start to come back to reality. And when they did, this would be the result. And so this is the reason why countries all over the world are lining up with asset-based systems, trying to avoid this very thing so that they don't go down when this ship goes down. Are you picking that up? Are you picking up what I'm putting down? So this is going to get really dicey. And some of the biggest names in the West, what they call the Magnificent Seven. I've never seen that before. This is a first for me. But hey, they call it the Magnificent Seven. Imagine that. Set to shed $1 trillion in value, led by Apple and NVIDIA. If you don't know who NVIDIA is the video card maker. They're really important for all the video stuff that you see, but they're also important for Bitcoin mining. So they're very, very important part of the sort of backbone of the NASDAQ and the tech sector, right? So Apple and NVIDIA led a sell-off in technology stocks on Monday as U.S. recession fears. And as I told you, Berkshire Hathaway's decision to cut its stake in the iPhone maker punctured a months-long rally in the sector. So they were pumping, getting people believing that it was good news. Everything's great. Things are going wonderful. Bam. And they took everybody's, they took even Bitcoin dropped to 50,000. It was up around 70. And it's dropped all the way down to 50. High-performing shares of Alphabet, Amazon, Meta platforms, Microsoft, and Tesla all pumped stocks. All this has been pumped, in my opinion. It's just my personal opinion, but that's what I see. Fell as much as 12%. So they let the air out. They let the pumping out, right? And the losses of the Magnificent Seven stocks were set to wipe out nearly $1 trillion from the combined market value of the companies. Well, they got to get the money from somewhere, folks. They got to get it from somewhere. And so this is how they do it. This is a very tricky game that we're watching be played right in front of us as they're trying to kick the can down the road as long as possible to keep us from knowing what's really going on. Okay? And the people that get hit the hardest are the average guy on the street, because that's who's going to get hit as prices skyrocket, as stores change their policies, as companies go out of business because they can't keep up with their debt payments. All these things affect the average guy. Fears the U.S. is heading for a recession. What? Man, we already had a recession. The technical definition of a recession was met last year. It was a successive quarters with a downturn, and we had that already. And so this is more of the gaslighting you see going on. Fears U.S. is heading for, trying to make it sound like it's in the future and not what you're in right now. Global stock, when prices triple in a year, in 2 years, right? You're in a recession. Trigger a global stock market plunge with Japan's Nikkei experiencing the worst sell-off since Black Monday. And so again, you're seeing these graphs, right? Folks, take these pictures to heart. These are not, don't look at them as math. Look at them as reality. This is the direction that the people have in confidence in the things of this world. This is really an indicator, in my opinion, of the confidence level that's dropping as people are awakening. As more people begin to realize just how many lies we've been told and how many things are not quite as we were told, the more that happens, the more skeptical people become, the more difficult it is for them to run their programs. Their programs are all con games. They're confidence games. That's why they need news. That's why they need social media. That's why they need music and actors and all kinds of different players in the con game to get the public sort of on board with whatever it is they're selling. Reality has nothing to do with it. How many times have we all heard job numbers or economy numbers coming out of some government official's mouth that had absolutely nothing to do with real time and on the ground situations that people are experiencing. And this is no different. And so we're going to continue to see more and more of this economic warfare. Normally, I start off with kinetic warfare, but this is kinetic warfare, folks. This is a different level of strategy to literally destroy a people economically, to put them in a state of despair. And as a result of that despair, they're going to turn on one another. And one of the challenges that we face going forward in every nation really is seeing through the propaganda, the smoke, and being able to navigate with level heads. That's why we keep saying we want to be informed without being overwhelmed. Now, moving into the kinetic end of this warfare, we're seeing, of course, a lot of conflict is coming up. As a matter of fact, as we were coming in to do tonight's report, we're seeing, of course, that Biden is heading into the Situation Room as Iran threatens an attack on Israel. Well, they didn't just threaten an attack on Israel. I need to make that really clear. They also threatened all allies of Israel and anyone that helped them. And so here we go, folks. This is something we knew was on its way. We kept telling everyone this was happening. He is going to continue to discomfort his people, by the way. And so those of you that are in harm's way are starting to get the memo. It may be time to move. President Joe Biden is scheduled to meet with his national security team in the Situation Room later on Monday amid heightened tensions between Iran and Israel. The Islamic Republic could attack Israel in the next 24 to 48 hours following a major attack by Hezbollah that left 2 IDF soldiers injured, top Western diplomats have warned. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken told the G7 yesterday that an attack in response to Israel's killing Hamas's political leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran and Fuad Shakur in Beirut was imminent, as reported by Axios. And so, of course, to start a war, you've got to kill people. And so they kill people in other people's countries. And what a shock. It's now getting a response. And what a shock. Even people who were reluctant to go to war with you are going to now go to war. So this is going to get interesting as we go. Something we posted last week, even while I was on vacation, but we didn't get a chance to talk about, so I want to mention it here, is that the U.S. is not an innocent player in this. The U.S. is in the mix here. And so, again, if there's a threat against Israel, there's also a threat against any of the forces that are aligned with Israel. So that's something to keep in mind. And the U.S. is deploying at least 12 warships to the Middle East amid soaring tensions. The Pentagon officials told us, this was last week we saw this, Pentagon officials tell Washington Post destroyers positioned in the Persian Gulf in Eastern Mediterranean following a high-profile assassinations of Hamas and Hezbollah leaders. Blinken urges all parties to cease escalating actions. That's not going to happen. Okay, the U.S. is going to continue to escalate this. Remember, the best way to cover some of these economic situations is with a kinetic war. I don't need to go into that. There are other pundits and excellent people like General McGregor and others that are analyzing this from a military standpoint. I think they do an excellent job. I'm not trying to suggest that I know the ins and outs of that. What I can tell you from a biblical standpoint, from a scriptural standpoint, is that they have to keep you off balance and easily deceived. And the only way they can do that is to continue to put you in a state of fear. This is why the king 365 times says, "Fear thou not." Fear is your biggest problem out here, and fear will get you to make decisions that you shouldn't make. And so it is something that we need to be very careful about. And the airspace over the Middle East is now, there's a lot of alerts that are now coming out. They're starting to shut down. I don't believe there's many flights going in and out of Israel right now. Iran's airspace is restricted, and reported as U.S. warns of imminent strike on Israel. So they're taking this, Israel today, that's what Israel Hayom means. The U.S. is responding to the heightened tension by moving more military assets into the region and working to assemble a coalition similar to the one that helped Israel defend against Iran's massive missile and drone attack in April. And if you read between the lines in April when we were covering that, we did see that they launched a certain number of drones and missiles that were decoys, and the actual missiles that they were shooting at actual targets actually landed. Something that was downplayed in mainstream media, but we caught. So Iran was in fact effective in hitting. If you recall, they landed one in the Golan Heights. I believe it was a military target. And I also believe that they took out one of the refineries, if I remember correctly. Correct me if I'm wrong, folks. But if memory serves, I believe that Israel took out one of the refineries Iran rather, took out one of Israel's refineries. They only have two, and they took out one of them. And so things may get very, very dangerous for Israel now. And again, that of course is square on scripture, and many people are talking about Ezekiel chapter 38 right now. The U.S. Embassy is urging citizens to leave Lebanon on any available ticket. They don't care if you're going to which direction, north, south, east, or west. Get out of this theater. And this is wisdom. The scripture tells us when we see enemies encompassing Jerusalem, we're supposed to depart there. So there is wisdom in getting out of harm's way when you see trouble coming, right? That's part of wisdom, is a wise man sees trouble afar off and hides himself. The simple, however, ignore the danger and ignore the signs, and they move on. The U.S. Embassy in Lebanon is urging its citizens Saturday to leave Lebanon on any ticket available amid fears of all-out war between Israel and Hezbollah and a border regional conflict. Despite flight suspensions and cancellations, commercial transportation options to leave Lebanon remain available, the embassy said, and we encourage those who wish to depart Lebanon to book any ticket available to them, even if that flight does not depart immediately or does not follow their first choice route. In other words, get out of Dodge. And by the way, folks, one of the things that has happened in recent years, I remember since the 1991 first Gulf War invasion, and people that were contractors, military contractors, expats, all kinds of people that were living in country, Iraq, Kuwait, and in other places, Syria included, suddenly found their neighbors were not as hospitable as they were just a few weeks before, and suddenly found that they were no longer welcome in that country. And so any hostile feelings people were harboring under the guise of diplomacy suddenly were gone, and they were naked with their feelings. And so those that are left behind in these situations, thinking that, hey, we're good with the locals, that changes quickly, especially in a war situation. It becomes us against them very quickly, and very easy to identify who they think are enemies. As a matter of fact, there's a number of people that expats who thought that South America or Central American countries would be a good place to hide and sort of camp out, and they're finding out that they're being persecuted in those places because, again, once you put a war scenario in front of folks, they become very tribal very quickly. So again, if you didn't know that, or you didn't grow up in that type of scenario, then you don't know that, and that may catch you by surprise. Let me tell you, firsthand experience, when it hits the fan, people get very, very tribal, and it gets very dangerous if you are not part of whatever particular group you happen to be walking through, if you know what I mean. Okay. Right. And as a matter of fact, talking about some nasty neighbors and some gangs ganging up, there's some ganging up going on an international level, folks, that, we can't ignore. And this, again, prophesied to come. U.S. is not prepared, according to this report, for potential global war as China-Russia alliance grows. And both of these countries were slated by the West for destruction and parsing out. There were plans made for both countries. First China, then Russia, then they switched it. But both countries were to be attacked, defeated, and then parsed, cut into pieces. Okay? I think they found out about the plan. I'm just saying. I think they found out about the plan, and they hooked up. Okay? So the scripture says they would hook up, but just so you know, that's a big reason why the United States would need to increase its defense spending to Cold War era levels to challenge threats around the world as China, Russia, and North Korea and Iran foster an alliance. Look at this. So if you take on these guys, guess who else you have to take on? That could lead to global war, according to a congressional commission formed to examine the national defense strategy. Where this goes, it seems to me, is terrifying. They're saying this openly, folks. They're literally trying to project their fear into you. Okay. But here's one thing we know. We know that for the elect's sake, these days will be shortened, which means the elect are there, because there would be no reason to short them if the elect weren't there. But I digress. And of course, we did miss this last week, but here's a big reason for a lot of this conflict that is now erupting in the Middle East. And of course, one of the things that I continue to say, and I'm pretty sure most of you agree with me, when none of us can figure out, at least not to a satisfactory answer that would satisfy any of us, what the value of a bomb is. What does it solve? Who does it help? What does it do? I can think of good reasons to use explosives if you're making a hole or a cave. But other than that, I can't think of a really good reason for them. At least 12 were killed, including children, in the Golan Heights rocket attack. Israel and the U.S. blame Hezbollah. Doesn't matter who did it. Doesn't even matter. None of this matters. It's all nonsense. And by the way, notice what day that is. I mean, this is amazing, some of the consistency that we see. In fact, this last Shabbat, we were saying, well, we have to pay attention to see what happens now. A rocket attack on a soccer field in Israel-controlled Golan Heights killed at least 12 children and teens and wounded several others, Israel said, hours after an Israeli airstrike on South Lebanon killed 3 members of the militant Hezbollah group. So this is just tit for tat. One bomb, another bomb, and more people die. Okay? And they justify this by saying he was bad. Well, I think he just became bad too. I don't think one is better than the other. And so this is amazing to watch. And I pray, I really, truly pray that this is where we are headed to, the Isaiah prophecy, where we beat our swords into plowshares, and we've had about enough of the military industrial complex in every country. Okay? Because it's really just getting ridiculous. Speaking of ridiculous, if you've been paying attention to South America, then you know that Venezuela just had an election, and this is a really interesting situation going on down there. And Venezuela is part of a prophecy to attack the United States. So there's that. That was put out there in the 1980s by Dimitri Duduman. Venezuela on the brink of civil war after both Putin's pal Maduro and opposition leader declare victory in tinderbox election. And without getting too deep into this, bottom line is it looks like there was some definite hanky-panky with regard to the count. The reaction in the streets is very, very volatile. And so we expect to see some volatility coming from Venezuela. Why does that matter, folks? Well, if you're in the West, then you're going to see another massive influx of migrants, which if, again, we're all paying attention, the United States is not the flush house it once was, and so it's having trouble feeding its own people. This could get really interesting, okay? And again, the numbers on the border have been a major issue of discussion, and now we have an election year, so this is just going to continue to be sort of a push back and forth. And I do believe that there are those that want to import what support for their ideas in society, and they're trying to import those. I think we all are seeing that, and frankly, I wonder if that's going to be successful. So there's a lot happening that is pressuring the nations, as the scripture says. So the nations are starting to feel the tossing to and fro. And we're seeing it even in the weather and in every way. And so the situation in the Middle East is going to continue to get more difficult. We see Shin Bet, by the way, Israel is preparing an underground bunker. So they start a war, and then their leaders go into an underground bunker. Look at this. An underground bunker in Jerusalem where senior leaders can remain for an extended period during a war has been prepared by the Shin Bet security surface, the Wallace news site reports. The bunker can sustain hits from a range of existing weaponry, has command and control capabilities, and is connected to the Defense Ministry headquarters in Tel Aviv. So they're letting everybody know that they're picking a fight, and then they're going to run in their hole. Okay? They're going to run into the caves, right? Now, why is that important? How does that relate to Scripture? Well, according to the book of James, this is exactly what we would see. We would see people trying to run to gold and silver. Their gold and their silver would be called cankered. According to the Scripture, he says that it would be judgment or witness against them. Trying to save their own lives, they will lose them. And then there are those who would, mighty men, generals, men of renown, the valiant men would hide themselves in the rocks, in the dens, and say, hide us from him who sits upon the throne. And so this is just more fulfillment of the Scripture when we see that. Here's another fulfillment of the Scripture. You can't lie to the earth, and the earth is reacting to everything going on it. And so we're seeing unprecedented levels of volcanic activity. I said almost in joking the other day, maybe we need a volcano, a hurricane, an earthquake, and a tornado, and then a bomb going off. Maybe that will be enough for people to think perhaps Elohim is trying to unsettle us so that we perhaps get together. Italy's Mount Etna erupts again, sends ash plume 32,000 feet into the sky. And we're worried about the emissions of vehicles. Selah. Mount Etna's latest eruption caused flight delays at Catania International Airport in Sicily. It's the 5th time the volcano has erupted this summer. 5 times this thing has erupted. Now, Mount Etna has always been in recent years quite active, but it is interesting that we're also seeing activity in other volcanic areas. Remember the volcano that went off in Iceland, also one in Indonesia, and I believe one in Japan. And so to see news reports coming out of Yellowstone and coming out of Mount St. Helens area, where they're seeing increased earthquakes, that, well, can be concerning. As a matter of fact, U.S. state is rocked by more than 60 earthquakes with up to 5.1 magnitude in a week. And so this is another part of the world. This is happening in Texas, by the way. A single county has reported more than 60 earthquakes in the last week. All right. And again, this is from last week, but I didn't get a chance to share this. And Gregorian County in West Texas was hit by a 5.1 magnitude quake on Friday, which was felt as far north as Oklahoma, followed by a 4.5 and a whole bunch of others. And so we're starting to see more earthquake activity, and that is square on what he prophesied would occur in the book of Matthew, chapter 24. And so we're also seeing these in the West Coast, and no one's really surprised by earthquakes going on the West Coast, but there is a frequency matter, and so we're paying attention because the frequency is getting higher, and so is the intensity. U.S. Geological Survey reported a 4.9 magnitude quake with an epicenter near Barstow, California, about 103 miles northeast of Los Angeles. And the quake was at a depth of nearly 5 miles. That's how deep the quake was. That's down there a bit, okay? And it was downgraded from an initial report of 5.1. And so what we're seeing, of course, is in diverse places, the earthquakes that Mashiach warned us would come. And it seems like almost every week we're talking about either an earthquake or a volcano or some type of mass geological event that indicates that the very earth itself is reacting to things going on the surface, which in and of itself is quite scary. So yes, exactly. It is birth pangs. It is indicators that the king is coming. He's not running for king. He doesn't need your vote. He is king. And so let us all be humble in this hour and seek first the kingdom and his righteousness. Argentina is doing some interesting things. So, these guys really, pumped this new president of Argentina like he was going to be great. And so far, I've seen some really interesting things coming out of Argentina, not far from Venezuela. So that part of the world's got some interesting things going on in their water. Okay. Argentina will use AI. Look at this, guys. And I like how it's interesting how they do these things in like third other countries, as if it's not, it's like, oh, we're not doing this in America. We're doing this over here, just over there, way over there. Well, that they're soft selling it to the world from here. Argentina will use AI to, quote, predict future crimes. Future crime. Okay, that's Minority Report with, what's his name? Mr. Mission Impossible. And so, I forget his name. What's his name again? Tom Cruise. There it is. And he played a detective, and they used computers, and they used people that were, I don't know, trying to pretend they were, I don't know, psychic or something. And so they predicted crime using this technique. And experts worry for citizens' rights. You think? So Argentina's security forces have announced plans to use artificial intelligence to predict future crimes. And slowly but surely, they're making people subject to machines. There's a reason for that, because the people themselves have become machines, and they need to establish their rights to rule over the natural born. I know, crazy, right? Well, that's what they're doing. Pay attention. The country's far-right president, Javier Milei, this week created artificial intelligence applied to a security unit, which the legislator says will use machine learning algorithms to analyze historical crime data to predict future crimes. It's also expected to deploy facial recognition software, which, by the way, all of a sudden they're talking about like it's a brand new thing, to identify wanted persons, patrol social media, and analyze real-time security camera footage to detect suspicious activities. So once again, making it sound innocent and in the best interest of the public, but in reality, this is a power grab. Okay, and so this is very dangerous. And by the way, this whole facial recognition issue actually came up right before 9/11. It was 2001 when this facial recognition issue actually came up, and it was defeated in Congress. And then we had, the events, and then it was passed. So I remember that specifically. I was there, right? Now we were awake at that time. And so we saw this occur. So for now, 20 years later, my cousin David is on here as well. For them to be coming now, 20 years later, and acting like facial recognition is like this new tech that they just came up with is just, it's gaslighty. It's really interesting. And it keeps hitting the news as if it's something new when they've been doing this for now over 20 years. So just so you know that. And here's a story I meant to bring in earlier, but I do think it deserves some mentioning. I apologize for it being a bit disjointed, but I do think this is important with regard to biblical prophecy about a northern kingdom or a northern country invading Israel, right? And so Turkey's president, by the way, has said that his country could enter Israel to, quote, help the Palestinians, end quote. So now, all of a sudden, that scripture passage where you didn't really know, well, how will that come to pass? How will that happen? Right. And now you can maybe see, oh, wow, that would do it. Okay. That would do it. That would get people to think, yeah, that's legitimate. Like, Turkey should go in there. Let's help those poor Palestinians. Right. Little do we know that that's literally fulfilling the scripture as they come from directly north of Israel. So very interesting news. Just thought I would share that because it's one of those, you might have missed if you weren't paying attention type of stories, but definitely confirm the scripture and let us know where we are. I mean, it's basically telling us where we are in time, and we are running quickly out of time, my brothers and sisters. All the more reason for us to seek first his kingdom and his Zedekah. And by the way, one of the things that I continue to laugh at, and I probably shouldn't laugh at this, but I find it very funny because, they've been talking about, I've been a student of eschatology, which is the study of the last days, for most of my adult life. I actually became one as a teenager. So it's been my adult life. Right. And so we've all been watching these tech companies with great interest, right? Because how are they going to pull this off without the tech companies? So you got to know that as a guy who builds computers, I find it quite laughable that they intend to build these things on systems that keep on crashing. Okay. And it's quite interesting. So Microsoft was hit with another outage. They can't quite keep their systems going, but they're going to run the world. Just saying, Microsoft hit with another global outage with users unable to access emails, Xbox Live, and any 365 functions. Well, they make it sound again benign, but folks, these are things that businesses count on for day-to-day operation. And every minute they're down, they're not able to make money. So again, these global outages are a big deal, and it's now happened for a second time in just a few weeks. So for them to be acting as if they've got it all under control is really kind of laughable, in my opinion. I just think we're in charge until the next update, until the next patch, until everybody download the patch, and then we're back in charge again. It's really something else. And again, you got to remember that it's not in our best interest. Like I heard somebody on a Tucker Carlson show saying, what's the business model for a hotel? Hotel has empty beds. Empty beds only produce revenue when people rent the bed, right? That's the business model. So the more people that you have renting the beds, the higher percentage of occupancy, the more profitable that hotel is going to be. It's really a simple business model. It's not complicated. Is the business model for hospitals any different? Is there a different business model for a hospital with beds very similar to a hotel? No, the motives are the same. Okay. And so we have to be very careful when we see things happening in the medical area, because we have to know, well, is this an innocent mistake, or is this designed to fill more beds, right? More than 2,000 patients are exposed to HIV and hepatitis after a huge breach in hospital protocols. Infected blood scandal victims could get up to $3.4 million each because of this major mistake. A class action lawsuit has been filed after thousands of hospital patients were told they may have been exposed to various illnesses, including HIV. Okay, and nearly 2,400 patients who underwent anesthesia at Oregon facilities could also be at risk of infection. Do you really think they care about the money? The damage is already done, folks. Money's not going to do these people any good. They don't care about the money. They just print more. We have to be really careful when we put our lives in the hands of those that do not have any love. It's a very dangerous time. And so, again, be sober, be vigilant. And if you do have family members that need medical assistance and you can't get to one of the remnant, because there are a few that are remnant that are medical professionals, not many, but there are a few. And if you can't get to one of them, okay, then, you're going to have to go with you're going to have to be your patient's advocate. You're going to have to stand guard. You're going to have to protect them. You're going to have to pray over them. You can't just send someone to the hospital. Even doctors will tell you that. I'm telling you, even doctors will tell you that. And by the way, if you do know someone in the medical profession, don't be calling them up and ask them every question about, medical this and medical that. All right. Be careful with that. Be respectful, because they're busy people. Just saying. But we do need people that we can trust that tell us the truth. And unfortunately, we've gotten lied to in so many ways that it's really hard to sort through. So we need honest people telling the truth in this hour. I'm thankful for the remnant with courage who are speaking the truth in love. And right now we're seeing continued reaction from the earth. How many have been paying attention to the fires going on west? I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, bears repeating, because these fires are not being contained. As of this is about a week and a half old, this story, but it continues. These fires continue throughout California. So there's millions of acres that are being lost as a result of these fires are going on. And so be in prayer for people in harm's way, folks. Many people were not obviously expecting that to happen. And then all of a sudden they're finding themselves, in a fire situation. And on Remnant Watch, by the way, there is a Really cool tool, California map and tracker. Here, I'm going to put it up on the screen real quick. Excellent tool for you to pay a little bit of attention to what's going on out there, and maybe if you're looking around at different areas and maybe even thinking of traveling, well, be aware, especially if you're traveling through some of these areas. These are all fires, and they will tell you to the degree that they are contained on this tracker. So it's a very good tool to keep on, especially if you're in that area, if you're in the West Coast and are kind of wondering, what's coming up. Yeah, I saw that in Oregon. The number of fires was just it was a stupendous number of fires. So definitely dangerous stuff going on. Hey, did you guys hear about this? It's kind of an interesting story, but one of the things that we've been talking about is not only this AI thing coming on board, if you will, but the robots as well, because that foretells the Terminator time, or the Matrix with the agents, and you can't tell what they are. Well, if they make these humanoids, lifelike enough, they could pull this off. And the conversational level is getting pretty close. It's going to pass some Turing tests. And now they're using humanoid robots. So this is something we've been watching fairly closely. This continues to come out in the narrative. So it's a very interesting thing. Once again, I believe they're headed toward making you the true sovereign, if you will, on earth, those who were called by Elohim to be fruitful and multiply. They're going to make you subject to a machine if they can pull it off. Okay. And if you stay inside their matrix, well, they kind of feel entitled to do that. Chinese made humanoid robots raise alarm in Congress. They're calling it a stealth army on our land. Ooh, they're not wrong. Advanced Chinese made robots with eerily lifelike capabilities are poised to enter the global market. And some U.S. lawmakers are already demanding that they be banned in the U.S., the Post has learned. It's not going to happen, but it's interesting that they're saying that. While not yet widely publicized, various Chinese companies have begun producing humanoid robots that are capable of carrying boxes, moving at high speeds, and even replicating human facial expressions. This is some spooky stuff. One leading Chinese firm, Unitree Robotics, has developed a $90,000 robot capable of running at speeds of up to 11 miles per hour. That's faster than Olympic speed, okay? A cheaper $16,000 version can absorb punches and kicks and twirl a baton. Wow. Many other firms have similar products under development. Why does this matter? Because there's people getting paid more than this. So now all of a sudden that business, instead of paying a person, say $25,000, $30,000, $40,000 in dealing with whether they show up or not, look what's happening. They're looking for alternatives to replace workforce and military force. Unfortunately, in order to pull that off, again, they have to make you subject, jurisdictionally subject to machines. Now, a clever way to do that is to turn people into machines, and you wouldn't notice that you were seamlessly already subject to machines or modified organisms or hybrids of some sort. This is all off the reservation stuff, folks. Things that we, are ill prepared to deal with because it is conversations that we didn't plan on having. And so we now have new legal implications. If somebody is no longer, if somebody is not a person, a man or a woman, can they take an oath of office? If they cannot take an oath of office, then they cannot hold that office, nor can they, if they are no longer a autonomous sovereign being, perform the duties of that. They are now under the control of a third party. They've been made a symbiotic being. We haven't tested this legally, but I believe that's coming. And as soon as they do, they're going to have legal precedents to say it's a different class or species. And it enjoys different jurisdiction. Right now, it enjoys no jurisdiction. except for whatever they can get people to roll over and give them as an assumptive. So they're going to presume, and they've done this before. They got people filling out forms without a law requiring them to. They got people doing all kinds of things that were presumed to be required, and they aren't required. There's no law for them, right? And so this is one of the things that we continue to fall for. And this is why it is so important for us to be sober-minded and understand exactly what we're looking at. And so when they went out to modify bodies, the temple of Elohim, and they made modifications to that and then left them in positions of authority to continue to exercise that office, they were essentially, we did by acquiescence, we essentially are acquiescing to that these hybrids, part man, part mud, part metal, part machine, as described in the book of Daniel, is acceptable as a form of governing, which is what the entire statue of Nebuchadnezzar was about. It was governance. It was world governance. Each of those were world governing powers. So the last would be mixed with mud or with clay and with flesh. And this is an unacceptable kingdom. It is the end of that statue. It is the end of the matter. And here we are. Because it is not lawful for those made in Elohim's image and after his likeness to be ruled by machines or hybrids, otherwise known in the scripture as Nephilim. Nephilim. Okay? So again, there are those who want to debate that. I get it. And there's probably going to continue to be debate. But you cannot argue with the fact that the body, the human body, according to the scripture, is the temple of Yahuwah. And so to deface it, to defile it, to desecrate it, and in any way modify it is an abomination. If you go far enough, it's an abomination that'll make you desolate. And so I do believe that we've got some very serious things that we're facing today. And another thing that we've been watching, continue to see these stories, and it gives me no pleasure to share them, but I do believe that they're an important indicator that the lights that are coming on, especially on those who were in positions of authority, positions of power, positions of leadership, and what's happening. The level of accountability is very high in these moments. And this is something that we knew also would come, but to behold it is quite another thing. And so here we are yet with another. How many of this in a row, guys? I don't even know how many weeks in a row this is, but we have another pastor who is resigning over inappropriate and hurtful actions. They tried to downplay this. Okay, they tried to make this a minor thing. It's not a minor thing. It's a big deal. The lead pastor of Cross Timbers Church in Argyle, Texas, another mega church, Josiah Anthony, has resigned over inappropriate and hurtful actions meted out to a current and former staff at the church due to prolonged struggle with his emotional and mental health. Boy, are they really trying to avoid saying the words that you and I both know full well what this guy probably did, right? And then, of course, as you read further, you can go on over to Remnant Watch, read the story further. You're going to find out that your worst fears are realized, right? Okay? This is what we're dealing with, folks. This is the kind of continued battle that we're going to continue to see. And I do believe that this is part of the last days experience that we're all meant to experience. Because if you experience this, then, you can't come back from this. Like he said, only with your eyes will you behold the recompense of the wicked. And I do believe that that's, in fact, what we're seeing. And speaking of only with your eyes, have you guys noticed what's going on in Great Britain? So this is something that we foresaw. This is a little bonus. I'm going to throw this in before we finish today. This was something we foresaw years ago. And I'm actually a little surprised that it took this many years for Great Britain to erupt. And we kind of knew it would eventually. But now in the streets of Great Britain right now, you're seeing here I'll play it again. You're seeing a serious backlash, a serious pushback that is going on against those powers, if you will, and these are government buildings are going to burn down. The people are finally reacting to these policies and ideas that are, well, counterproductive and counterintuitive. And this was expected to happen. So we're seeing a little Antifa action going on. I actually had another, let me see if I can find it. I had another video. And again, more, here it is. Yeah, they're starting to storm. They're storming their capitals and their government buildings and so forth. And they're protesting. So Great Britain is now going through its summer of rage. If you guys, those of you here in the United States, you're probably aware that we went through some of that. And then maybe we're going to see more of it. Yeah, there's a very strong possibility that we're going to see more of the same. But you're going to see the same kind of things with the flag carrying and the patriotism. And again, what did I tell you would happen? People get very tribal when things start to get rough, when things get bad. Again, people tribe up. And this is what I do believe you're going to see worldwide, is people tribing up. And pushing back is going to become very common. And they have to, folks. They have to push back. I mean, think about it. They have no choice. If they don't, they will lose everything they have. If they don't push back, if they don't stand in this hour, when will they, right? So you're going to see this in every nation as more and more ridiculous things are pushed, more and more things that are absurd on their face, and people know they're absurd. They're going to push back against that. And so in the meantime, our responsibility is to see that this is happening, right? While we're watching them all attack each other, while we're watching them do all the things that they do, that think they're bringing their whatever in, their resets and all this other stuff, this is our moment. This is the moment that you're supposed to be seeking out. Seek Yahuwah, seek out your brethren, get together with your brothers and sisters and get into your tribe. Okay, need to tribe up. They're smarter than we are. We need to get into the places that Elohim has called us to be, that we can be found faithful. And you'll find that he is, in fact, establishing places of safety and security for his people. Unfortunately, I do believe that a lot of folks are still struggling with the darkness in their lives. We're seeing this here, where folks don't want to be together with their brethren because they don't want people to know what they're doing in their lives. They don't want to know what's going on in their lives. They don't want their light. And men love darkness because their deeds are dark. And so we've got to get accustomed to this new light level. We got to get accustomed to being in the light and holding each other accountable and having an honest dialogue in not allowing these abuses. I mean, you can't tell me this, for example, this pastor in Texas, that this is all news to them. You know, this person's just personality. We just didn't know anything about it. Nonsense. They rode him until he built the big church. And then when they finally couldn't ride him anymore, out he went, because they knew about this flaw. And so understand, saints, that these things are going to continue to be exposed. Those that are abusing the people, using their positions like Phineas and Hophni to take advantage of folks, well, that's going to continue to be exposed in this hour. So just understand that. Know that this is the hour that you're living in. And there isn't going to be a quick fix or an easy fix as we go forward. And so just understand that. This is why it is so important for us to have our brothers and sisters in this hour uniting in one accord. Our encouragement to you is to find your fold. Find that place Elohim has for you. Well, that's it for tonight. That's our broadcast for this evening. I pray that it has been a blessing to you. May Elohim bless each and every one of you. Good night.